my name is Micaela Kaplan. I'm the ML Evangelist here at HumanSignal, which I like to describe as a fun way of saying that I'm a data scientist who now talks a lot about data science. So my job is to do a lot of our technical education around best practices and tools. I also work with a lot of clients to describe what we do, how we do it, and how to make it work best for you. So today we're going to be talking about how successful enterprises measure AI quality. It's a little hard for me to see you in the back, but how many of you are thinking about AI quality today? Show of hands. A bunch? Great. If you're not, you probably should be. It's never too soon to start thinking about it. So let's dive right in. You might have heard of the concept of AI evals, or AI evaluations. And I like to distinguish these evals from benchmarks by saying that evals are a process, and benchmarks are a tool within that process. So in the world of AI evaluation, you have things like statistical metrics, which are your classic precision, recall, F1, accuracy types of metrics that you might already be familiar with. You have, of course, your human in the loop, where you have humans go in and manually say, yes, this is right, no, this is wrong. You have your LLM as a judge techniques, which do something very similar to human in the loop, except that they use a model to make those judgments. And then you have this concept of benchmarks, which have become really popular in the last 6 or 8 months or so. And benchmarks are made up of a task set and a scoring method, so we'll dive into that for just a second. Great. Oops, going the wrong way. Alrighty. So what exactly is an AI benchmark? An AI benchmark is a standardized, repeatable test for an AI system. It has 2 key components. The first is a task set. This is going to be a test suite tailored to your use case or the use case of the benchmark. It might include happy path or common use cases, challenging use cases, places where you get bad feedback, or adversarial use cases. And it's going to cover a diversity of scenarios that might appear in your environment. It's also going to have a scoring method, which is how the benchmark is going to evaluate the correctness of a task. In some cases, this is going to look exactly like the regular statistical scoring that we're used to. You're going to have a classification task. You're going to have a right or a wrong answer. That's your scoring methodology. You have a test set. All is right and good in the world. You might also use judgment-based scoring, and we'll go into that in just a minute. But this is going to look at things like factuality. You might need to use a rubric, just like in English class, how your teachers would evaluate you, maybe by saying, if you say this point, you get 5 extra points, and if you say it this way, you get 10 points, and if you say it this other way, you're going to lose a couple points. Similar things apply to Gen AI because Gen AI models are non-discriminative. They don't give you the same answer every single time, and there is more than one right way to say the same thing. There's also composite methods where you might take a couple of pieces from both sets and combine them that way. This might sound very familiar to a lot of you. You might be thinking, Micaela, a test set with a scoring methodology is just a held out test set from machine learning. I don't know why you're giving a whole presentation about this. And that's a little bit true. This might sound pretty familiar, but I think in the world of Gen AI, it's important to distinguish exactly what we're doing. And unlike the traditional test sets of old, we want to make sure that these tests are standardized and repeatable so that we can compare different model versions against each other and different base models against each other. So now we're going to build some confidence in our models, and we're going to talk about where leaderboards fall short. So you might be familiar with the concept of a leaderboard. HealthBench, I know OpenAI's benchmark released back in May. We were working very closely with the Legal Bench group that released a legal benchmark back just a couple weeks ago. And you might have heard about these leaderboards where different models compete to see who can do the best on a given benchmark set. And those can be great. A generic benchmark is going to test general knowledge and general performance. They usually cover things like math or logic problems or reasoning, and they usually use public or semi-public data sets. So here on the screen, you can see an example question from the 2024 AMY, which is a math exam given to high school students. And you can see at the top here, there's a question about, I think, ice cream and how many scoops people got or something like that. And you can see how 2 different models answered the question. This is great. It allows us to compare how different models approach the same thing. We can see differences in their reasoning, we can see differences in their output, and all is good, except not when it's on your data, because most of the time, your data isn't public. So how can, OpenAI or Anthropic or any of the other big players in the space build a benchmark that's really going to work for you? This is where custom benchmarks come into play. So custom benchmarks are going to test what you care about. They're going to use domain-specific knowledge and jargon. They're going to give you a safe place to use internal, messy data that you might not be able to make public or might just be too messy to make public. You also can test for things that aren't necessarily exactly what the benchmarks always test, things like KPIs, things like business outcomes that you really care about. So here on the top, we have an example of a question you might be asking in one of your own benchmarks. I think this example comes from a financial institution. And below it, you can see that we have a rubric. So this is that rubric-based scoring I was talking about earlier. Instead of looking for a right or a wrong answer, because again, how does generative AI have a true binary right and wrong? We ask instead to look for things like risk identification. Do we ask for things like regulatory and compliance? We ask for things like practical next steps, and we ask for KPIs, like a balance between our service providing and our compliance. And by breaking our rubrics down in this way, we can really get an understanding of where our models perform well and where they might need some love. And as you create these benchmarks, it can feel really overwhelming, right? You don't necessarily want to start with thousands and thousands of samples. It's not going to work well for you, it's not a good use of your time, and it feels really overwhelming. So instead, we say that benchmarks should evolve as your models evolve, right? I come from a research background in product-facing research for the most part, so I often lived in proof of concept, deep in understanding land, right? At the very beginning of a project, I wanted to know that it worked, but I didn't care if it worked on every single edge case. I wanted to know that my model was good enough that it warranted more investment, not that it should go directly into production. And when you're in that stage of the process, you're really answering the question, does my model do what I want it to do? You're gonna look at just a couple of key test examples. You're gonna look for basic functionality. You're gonna use maybe 20 to 50 key tasks, and that's fine for the beginning, right? The important thing is that we document our benchmarks. How can we understand exactly what is being done, when it's being done, so that our models stay comparable? As your benchmarks evolve, you can no longer compare your models if one is using an old benchmark and one is using a new benchmark, because they're not the same benchmark. But as you go through this process and you deepen your understanding, you're gonna start adding more tasks to your benchmark. You're gonna start understanding failure patterns. Then you're gonna maybe take an off-the-shelf benchmark and really understand, okay, well, what does the industry want? Where do I fall on an industry level, and how can I take those questions and make them fit in my space? So hopefully by now I've convinced you that a custom benchmark is really the way to go. And now we're gonna talk about how you build one. You might be able to think to yourself, all right, I could take my questions and I could upload them into a spreadsheet, and I could answer a bunch of questions and build a rubric there. I'm gonna stop you. That sounds like my nightmare. Please don't do that. Instead, the first thing you should do is understand what quality means to you. Is it factual accuracy? Is it fluency, grammar, and flow? Do you care more about brand policies or alignment with your company values? Where does compliance and risk fall in? And what KPIs are you really looking to measure? Next question you need to ask, who needs to be involved? The data scientists probably should be, because they're the ones building the model. They'll know what quality to the model looks like. But domain experts should also definitely be involved. If you have a team of data scientists working on a medical use case, probably some doctors should look at your data and say, hey, what does correct mean from the medical standpoint, not just from the data standpoint? You also want to make sure anyone who's involved in compliance is involved in this benchmark building process, as well as business owners who are going to be able to really tell you KPIs. Building a benchmark is a collaborative process. And the right benchmark is going to answer all of these questions. Are we at the threshold to trust this in production? Is our new model better than our last? Can we adopt a cheaper model without losing quality? By building a benchmark, we have real, tangible metrics that we can use to answer these questions and more. You're not just saying, all right, well, I think this model is better. So this is a screenshot from the Label Studio platform. You can see here on the left, we have the user query on top, a sample response in the middle, and a reference of some data benchmarks at the bottom that we can use to help inform our decisions. And on the right, we're gonna generate these rubric criteria. So you can see that we've typed into the box, the answer must disclose that AI is not a medical professional. This is gonna be worth 10 points. We can leave any comments we want to leave about why this question matters, correct or incorrect answers, anything else we might need to know. And when we export this from Label Studio, we'll have a rubric that is associated to a specific question. This allows us to build rubrics that are comprehensive and understandable and not so generic that they're not gonna help us anymore. You can also use Label Studio to evaluate these benchmarks. So this comes from HealthBench. But you can see here that we've built an interface that allows you to go through and just check off what number you think should be scored. And this could be done by a model, but it could also be done by a human. And depending on where you're at in that process, it will depend on whether you want a model or a human to do this work. And in fact, if you're using a model to do this work, you should probably have a human check it at least sometimes anyway, because models are models, and they don't always perform the way we think they're going to perform. How can we be sure? We use a benchmark. This is the part of my talk where I'm obligated to give you a sales pitch. So I work for a company called HumanSignal, which is the maker of a product called Label Studio. You can find us at labelstud.io, which is a great website for marketing and sales and a terrible website name for SEO. Thanks, I appreciate that. We have a whole bunch of information about building custom benchmarks, annotating data, and more. We have a couple different tiers of our product. We have an open source version, an enterprise version, and a middle tier that we call Starter Cloud. I'm excited to tell you today that you can have a free trial of Starter Cloud by scanning the QR code here if you're interested in figuring out what this product is, how it might be useful to you and your data. And we also have a booth. We're upstairs on the end, kind of by where the executive roundtables are. We have some fun swag. If you've seen the possums around, that's us. Her name is Heidi. She's very cute. So yeah, come to our booth. You can feel free to email me directly with questions. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. I can't quite see. All right, thank you.